Between the TikTok ban and trying to get started with a YouTube channel, I sort of realized that I never fully published a true top 10 of the year list. So before the Oscars this weekend and we kind of close the book on last year's movies, I do want to just go ahead and put out a definitive top 10 list. Again, this is my list. Of course, it's subjective. It's not necessarily the 10 best movies I think of last year, but it's 10 of my favorites and 10 that I think are definitely worth your time. Starting off strong, we have Greg Quadar's Sing Sing. This is one of the absolute best movies of last year. I know A24 kind of pivoted their strategy. They always put out a ton of movies and they ended up putting all their cards on the Brutalist. I get why, but I just think that this movie really got the short end of it all because it's really, really powerful. It's super enjoyable. It's thrilling. It's got great performances in it, and it tells a really important story. If you don't know what Sing Sing is, it is all about the characters. Some of them even play real life versions or amalgamations of themselves about inmates at the Sing Sing prison in New York who join a program that is all about taking inmates and allowing them to perform in theatrical productions. It is a beautiful story about self-expression and what real freedom means, and it's got enough of everything you want out of a great movie. It's got heartbreaking moments, it's got funny moments, it's got, camaraderie and thrills and things like that, and of course tension and all the things you need from it. Coleman Domingo has never been better than he is in this movie, but he shines amongst the rest of the stars in that film. Clarence Macklin is a name I obviously did not know before seeing this movie, but since seeing it, I have become a massive fan. If you have not yet, check out Marc Maron's interview with him. He seems like such a genuine guy, and his love for acting speaks so loudly. This movie really did not get the love it deserved, but it was certainly one of my favorites. It's one that stuck with me for a very, very long time. So if you have not seen Sing Sing, I highly recommend it, just like all the other movies on this list. Number 9 is Nosferatu. There's no secret that I love this movie. I think it's one of the strongest horror efforts of the year. It feels like, for a lot of people, this felt like a known quantity to some extent. I mean, it's a very old story, and we've gotten a lot of iterations of it in the past, but Robert Eggers remains one of the most exciting horror filmmakers, or just filmmakers in the game right now, and this is probably his strongest effort to date. Everything is so airtight on this. I mean, it looks gorgeous, it feels incredible, the performances are absolutely perfect. It just feels like everything is moving in the right direction on this movie, and it all comes together for this very, very powerful final product. It's not necessarily the scariest movie of the year, but I will say the scares are for sure real in this. I mean, we saw it at 11 p.m. on Christmas Day in IMAX, and we were jumping out of our seats a little bit, but I just think that this has everything I want out of a horror movie. I mean, a brilliant lead performance from Lily Rose Depp, as well as Bill Skarsgård, some great supporting acting work from Willem Dafoe and Aaron Taylor-Johnson, and all the rest of the people in the movie, Ralph Ineson. And like I said, this movie just looks incredible. It looks like they were filming in, wherever they took this location. I mean, between the amazing cinematography from Jaron Blaschke, longtime partner of Robert Eggers, and also just, the production design, the costumes, I mean, everything is just immaculate. And I think that if you're a horror fan, this has to scratch a massive itch for you, because it did for me. Next up is A Real Pain, which is one of the first movies I saw last year. I watched it virtually for Sundance, and I haven't really stopped thinking about it since. I mean, it was something that really spoke to a lot of my own personal values and my own family history and just experiences that I went through. But I think it's something that ended up being surprisingly universal. I didn't know that this movie was going to really take it as far as it did. I mean, seeing Kieran Culkin be the projected favorite for the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. I mean, Jesse Eisenberg has been making the rounds for his brilliant script and his amazing direction. This is a movie that I am surprised but excited to see resonating with a lot of people. I think it tells some important stories about family and relationships, different types of just male stereotypes and dynamics that I think, as a man, I know we need more diverse stories, but I found to be pretty interesting and pretty thrilling. I think this movie has it all. It is funny. It is sad when it needs to be. It is sharp. Again, Jesse Eisenberg, I know a lot of people didn't see When You Finish Saving the World, which was his first directorial effort. I liked that movie. I felt like one of the few people who had something good to say about it. But beyond what you thought about that movie, I find it pretty undeniable that there is a great filmmaker behind it. And with some maturing and some growth. Jesse Eisenberg has showed that his voice is strong and unique and polished in a way that, you know, you can tell he's been writing plays for a very long time, that he's been working in movies for such a long time. He's going to go on to have a really great career as a filmmaker, I think. And I love that he still acts in these movies because he's still one of my favorite actors. There's a lot to love about this movie. And again, it's something I saw way back in January of 2024, and it's something that stuck with me all this time. So I think there's something to that for sure. Coming in at number 7 is Ramel Ross's Nickel Boys. This is a movie that not enough people saw. I was so excited to see it getting some recognition from the Academy because I hope more people will go to see it. But beyond being a really important story, it's one that's told with a very fresh perspective. I mean, most of this movie is filmed in first-person POV, and something like that has been done in the past, but I think it serves the narrative here in such a special way. And when it all does come together, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but when it all comes together, it is just such a punch to the gut. It is so good. I mean, this is what movies are about just shocking with emotion in a way that feels earned and important, and this movie has all of that. The performances are excellent. The time period is set amazingly. This is a story about injustice that still is pervasive in today's society, and something that feels like a long time ago but really wasn't. And so I love to see a filmmaker come out with this fresh perspective and put out a story that I believe to be really important, but also something that just entertains on every single level. I highly recommend Nickel Boys. If you haven't seen it, truly one of the year's best. I mean, you'll see this one topping a lot of really well-respected film critics' lists, so it's well worth the time. I promise. This one is serious. For number 6, I know we've been talking about movies that maybe not enough people saw, but no movie was failed this year quite to the level of Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. This movie is simply just one of the best films of the year. It is action-packed, but it contains so much depth and character here. It is an epic, and it is just baffling to me why nobody wanted to go see this movie. I know Mad Max Fury Road ended up really catching a lot of buzz and popularity after its release. I know after it got a lot of Oscar buzz, it became something much more popular and a cult favorite. It's been since played a lot as a rep screening at many theaters. They'll put that on the big screen, and it's just a marvelous experience. But Furiosa really delivered on everything I wanted out of a prequel for Mad Max. It just jumps right back into this world while expanding it in a really meaningful way. I think Anya Taylor-Joy delivers one of the best performances of the year, and Chris Hemsworth is probably at his absolute career best in this movie. He is so good, and I don't know why no one's talking about this movie. I mean, it has blockbuster potential, and I know this summer was a weird summer for movies. It was a weird summer for blockbusters, but it felt like there was an opening for something to jump in and take that spot and just really be the definitive hit of the summer, and I just cannot figure out for the life of me why this wasn't it. So if for whatever reason you were lukewarm on the reactions to it and you just decided not to go, I think you owe it to yourself to go see this. I would love to see them put it back in theaters one day so that people can experience it on the big screen just like I did. I think it is something to be celebrated. I mean, George Miller is a legendary filmmaker, and this is truly him working at the maximal nature of his power. So, you know, if you have not seen Furiosa and you like action movies, even if you didn't like Mad Max Fury Road, this is a very different movie, but it works for a lot of similar reasons. I think it's well worth your time to check it out. And if you have seen it, then you know, like me, it's something that stuck with you all the way since this summer. It is truly one of the year's best films. It's probably the best action movie of the year, and it's something that I think everybody can find a little bit to love in. Before we get into our top 5, I do just want to talk about some honorable mentions. I know it's easy to get caught up in what the best of the best was, and I know people every year are like, this was a terrible year for movies, and they will say that till the end of time, but I think this was actually a great year for movies, and there are a lot of things that I didn't get the chance to talk about, so I just want to shout them out real fast. I'll shout out Richard Linklater's Hitman. I think that is one of the funniest and most joyous movies of the year. The Glen Powell movement, peaked with that movie for me. I know Twisters was huge, but that's the one for me. The Substance, of course, is excellent. If you haven't seen The Substance yet, I highly recommend that. Kneecap was such a great biopic, probably my favorite musical biopic of the year, even in the year that saw Better Man, a movie I really like. Conclave is one of my absolute favorites. I mean, that is the quintessential B+ of a movie. I know people like to say that, but I think that movie is something that I just enjoyed every second of. I was this didn't necessarily take me into the stratosphere at any point, but I was just it is so well made. It was so enjoyable. I cannot wait to watch it again. I'm Still Here Such a great movie from Walter Salles. I think that this is going to be sadly outside the bubble a little bit with the discussion of what we're talking about this year. I mean, Fernando Torres is amazing in this movie. It is important now, maybe more than ever, to look at the way that, fascist governments just completely destroy lives and families and things like that. But this is just such a well-made movie. There's emotion at every beat of it, and it's well worth your time. So definitely check it out. Next up, we have our top 5, and I'll be honest with you, it's pretty hard for me to rank these movies. In my eyes, they are all pretty damn perfect, but I'll do my best to try to tell you which ones I think are simply the best of this year. We'll start with number 5, which is Sean Baker's Anora. This is a movie that you're going to hopefully hear lots about on Oscar night. If you haven't seen it already, it is truly one of the most entertaining and thoughtful movies of the year. Mikey Madison is a name that we have all come to love. Some of us have been rocking with her for quite a while. From her film career, you may remember from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or even Scream, but this is by far her biggest effort. She's given the most to do here, and she puts this movie on her back. It is just one of the most electric performances I've seen all year, and Sean Baker has never been better. Sean Baker is a filmmaker that, has been around for a long time, and I have come to really, really respect him. The Florida Project, I think, is one of the best movies I've ever seen. I think Red Rocket is like an undersung masterpiece, and I think that this is probably his best movie that I've seen so far. So I'm really, really excited to see how this one's legacy sort of gets cemented. It has everything you want out of high caliber filmmaking. I mean, a roller coaster of emotions and just amazing performances. I think something really special about Sean Baker is that, while he has a couple of familiar people like Karen Kilgallion, who's in this movie, who's amazing, he has a lot of unknowns in his movies too that really give it a very verite feel, I'll say, a very truthful sort of feeling to it. And this one's in New York. He photographs it beautifully. It's something that's so easy to celebrate to me, and it leaves you with a lot to talk about and a lot to discuss. And I think it's just a perfect example of indie filmmaking. Regardless of how things shake out at Oscar night, it is still impressive to talk about this movie winning the Palme d'Or at Cannes last year. That is huge. It's one of the first American movies to win in a very, very long time. And it's another big win for Neon. And in a lot of ways, it's just signaling a massive shift in what we consider to be prestige filmmaking. I mean, there's an intersection coming here between ambitious indie films and, like I said, high caliber prestige filmmaking, something the Academy can really get behind, while also just having a broad mainstream appeal. I mean, this is an entertaining movie. I went to go see this with some people who are big film fans, but also some people who this will be one of maybe 2 movies they see this year, and they loved it. So there's a lot to really appreciate here. I think Anora is a really special movie. I highly recommend you go check it out. Number 4 is one of the few movies that I've been able to watch more than once this year. It is Challengers. This is a movie that I don't care if it was shut out of Oscar night. Like, this is one of the best films of the year, bar none. I am a Luca Guadagnino stan. I love that man. I think some of his projects work better than others, but this one is just unbelievably good. Whether you're a sports fan or you like erotic cinema or whatever it is, there is something here that is just simply electric. The energy of this film is undeniable, whether it be from the Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross score, or the incredible 3 lead performances, or the great script from Justin Kuritzkis, who now has one of my favorite partnerships with Luca Guadagnino. I mean, those dudes are doing incredible work together. Sion Mukti is one of the best cinematographers working. This is one of the best looking movies of the year. I could go on and on forever celebrating this movie. It is so much fun. I know some people were saying, when you rewatch Challengers and the moment of it is over a little bit, you might not be so hot on it. Guess what? I rewatched it and I liked it as much, if not better, than the first time I saw it. This is something I foresee myself watching many, many times in the future. This was a cultural moment. It felt like everybody was talking about Challengers for even just a minute there. People who I know are massive film lovers, people who never go see any movies. I mean, that one and Anora feel like a huge crossover, and I love Challengers. I love that movie. Talking about crossover massive hits, it's gonna bring me to number 3, which is no surprise to anybody here, one of the biggest movies of the year. For a lot of people, this will top their list, and that's completely respectable. We're talking about Denis Villeneuve's Dune 2. Better than the first one? Maybe. But together with the first one, it has the makings of some of the strongest sci-fi filmmaking of all time. And Denis Villeneuve is one of the greatest directors living, walking the earth today. And what he's able to put forth here, his vision, the production design, the costumes, the look of this movie, his work with Greg Fraser, and of course Hans Zimmer giving this the soundtrack of a lifetime. I mean, this movie is I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it because something like this just doesn't come around that often. And Dune is an old story, of course. We see the way it influenced so many other massive sci-fi tentpoles, but the way that this movie has delivered on not only being what seemingly is faithful to the original story, but just so entertaining and something that's so, critically, it has been lauded. Audiences are falling in love with this movie. It made plenty of money and it was a massive hit. I mean, there was a phenomenon surrounding this movie. It's clearly going to be one of the biggest movies of this year. It deserves to be that. And I cannot wait to see what they do with this series because, this could have been just a basic action sort of thing, but there's a lot of really deep ideas and really important things that this movie is going to say about, the definition of a hero and what that looks like in fanaticism and all these big ideas that were present in the source material. Those are all coming to the forefront here. It's well acted. It looks and feels amazing, like I said. And for the longest time, it just felt like it was all anybody was talking about. It still feels like it's kind of all everyone's talking about. I mean, just the imagery is so pervasive in our culture. I mean, Austin Butler is one of the biggest stars on the planet. He is huge. Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya. Like, when we look back on 2024, this will be probably the movie that we end up talking about. Whether it wins a ton of Oscars or absolutely none of them, it doesn't matter. This is going to be something that people will remember for a very long time, even if we never get a third movie. We will, hopefully. But even if we don't, this is enough. Like, we ate good. Now, my number one and number two are tied, I think. I mean, like I said, this top three especially could rotate. All these movies are perfect in my opinion. And coming in for number two is one of the most important movies of the year. I Saw the TV Glow. And if you haven't seen this movie, it's hard for me to fully recommend going in blind, although I do think that's the best way to do it. Just to kind of give you a little bit of a breadcrumb if you don't know what this movie is. This comes from Jane Schoenbrunn, who is one of the most exciting filmmakers in the psychological horror space. I would classify this movie as a horror, but I think there's a lot of other things going on with it too. It has a deep nostalgia to it for 90s television, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, things like that. And it tells the story about self-discovery and losing yourself in a piece of media, in a relationship, in life. And I think few movies produced the emotional response that this one did from me. It made an experience that for many people seems to be a confusing one, whether you're going through it or someone who's going through it, made it something that felt universal and visceral in a way that transcended the film you were watching. Like, you were like, I felt this deep in my core. I think Justice Smith is just like, I was kind of lukewarm on him before this. Detective Pikachu didn't exactly, give me the vote of confidence that he is a brilliant actor, but this one is truly one of the best showcases for a young actor that I've ever seen. And I just think that there's a lot to really, really appreciate here. But beyond how stellar this effort is, it really only is a sophomore feature. I'm so excited to see where Jane goes from this in the future. There's so many big ideas being covered here, and they're presented in such meaningful and unique ways. There are movies that present themselves as perfect, as like just massive achievements of cinema, but then there are movies that get me excited about the state of cinema, and this is one of them. It's of course an indie production, and it's something that it feels like a big studio would never touch. It is something that just stuck with me ever since I saw it. I think everybody I've talked to for the most part has some pretty strong feelings about this one way or the other. So if you've seen it, you know that this is something that can be really meaningful and a really, like I said, important movie. It won't be for everybody, but Jane Schoenbrunn makes movies that I think work best when you watch them alone in the dark. And I know that's like a weird ask, but like turn the lights out and like let it wash over you and let it really work its magic, because some of the best sequences and set pieces, some of the best dialogue is in this movie. And I just think it tackles some massive ideas in a way that I personally did not know a movie could do. And that's just such a unique feeling. We never, you see this on Twitter all the time. Someone's like, when was the last time you were really awed by something cinematically? Like, you watched something and you just couldn't believe that what you were watching exists. Like, not that you can't like understand it or fathom it, but it's like you were just so taken aback by something like that being out there in the world. Like, that was this movie for me. When I saw it in this theater, like, I'll never forget that theatrical experience of just, my jaw was on the floor and I just couldn't believe what I was watching. It really, really stuck with me more than enough for me to recommend this to just about everybody. I mean, I think that, like I said, the mileage will vary on this one, but I highly, highly recommend taking the chance on it. It's worth it. Now, to the number one movie, the best movie of 2024. If you haven't figured it out already, you've been watching this video, you probably know it's The Brutalist. Now, I know that not everybody loved The Brutalist, but again, if we talk about just achievements cinematically, few movies will embody that definition the way The Brutalist does. Beyond the story of this movie getting off the ground for that micro budget and, just being picked up at the festivals after massive buzz, like this movie came out of nowhere. And Brady Corbet was someone that people were familiar with, but I don't think that anybody, even if you had seen his work, knew that he was capable of delivering such a staggering piece of art. This is an epic in every sense of the word. It is something that connected with me on a personal level in a really meaningful way. And it just feels like, again, just a stunning piece of filmmaking. 3.5 hours that never once feels boring. Some of the richest character work we've seen all year from a technical perspective. I mean, it just looks gorgeous. It's shot in VistaVision. There's a nostalgia and a legacy to a movie like this. I mean, Brady clearly set out with some really, really lofty objectives. He wanted to make this movie the way he saw it, the way he envisioned it. Final Cut was really important to him. And whether you like this movie or not, I think it's hard to not stand behind what this movie stands for in the landscape of filmmaking. I mean, an original story that comes from, some relatively new filmmakers, that stars big name talent and was able to get picked up by A24, which is a massive film production company. Even though they are an indie film company, they're getting pretty big right now. And so, this movie came out of nowhere for me. I mean, I feel like I keep my ear to the ground, but once the ball started rolling, it was like, how do I see this movie? How do I see The Brutalist? It is something that everybody I know is like at least aware of The Brutalist, which is like so wild to me because that's not a movie that I think that everyone will like, but I think it just speaks to the word of mouth and how impressive something like this is. I mean, if you're not the biggest film fan in the world and you see this, it can be pretty astonishing in some of the best ways and challenging in a lot of really good ways too, in ways that movies today aren't. And while some of the discussion about this one has been in total bad faith, there have been a lot of really, really exciting pieces of discourse, some great think pieces written about this movie on both sides, people who loved it and people who hated it. I think that some of the best discussions I've had this year about movies came from talking about The Brutalist, and it's one of those experiences that I'll truly remember forever. Not that many movies get seen on film anymore, so seeing this one projected on 70mm was just epic in every sense of the word. I'm fighting super hard not to use that word monumental that everyone's using to describe this movie, but it is. It feels that big, it feels that important, and I know there's a self-importance that kind of goes into that, but I think just like, if you're a movie fan and you are excited to see fresh stories, that this is the one. And I just kept thinking about Cord Jefferson, who won the Oscar for screenplay for Writing American Fiction. And when he talked about in his speech, he's like, you can make these massive movies for these huge budgets or make a ton of ambitious smaller movies. So it's like, yeah, you can make one 40 million movie or four $10 million movies. And of course, we want to see people who work on these movies get paid and do this. But this movie stands as a monument to what can be done with the right team attached to it. What can be done even on the most stretched of budgets. I mean, this movie has been around in the production, cycle for, I think, about 8 years. I mean, it was attached with other cast members before Brody and Felicity Jones came on and before Guy Pearce came on. And this is something that took a really long time to get made. And I have to imagine that Brady and Mona Fazvold, his partner, for a long time probably thought maybe this movie was never going to happen. Like, it was something that a director works on for a long time and maybe one day has the clout to actually make it. But we see that. And in a year where we see a couple of things like that, I mean, we got to see Megalopolis this year. I mean, that's crazy. This is something that stands as a feat of cinema. It happens to be one that resonated with me on a very, very high level. I highly urge you to take the time. I know 3.5 hours is a lot to ask of some people. There is an intermission in this movie, and I promise you the pacing is such that it flies by. It really does not feel as long as it is. I think it is a challenging movie, both thematically and stylistically, but I do think it's something that can be extremely rewarding and can serve as a touchstone for a lot of people when it comes to just talking about films about immigration and the American epic and just like some of the best acting you've ever seen in your life. It is so, so worth your time. I could go on and on about The Brutalist. I won't. But again, that is my favorite movie of the year. Let me know down below in the comments what your favorite movie of the year was, or if you have any roasts from my list, let me know. I'm always down to hear them. Guys, if you like this video, make sure you leave a like and a follow. As always, keep watching great movies and have a great day. Peace.